It's all about the blood. Yep, that's the slogan in the ministry I operate and with the products that I buy. Hi, I'm Rick Tehijo Binya, and I'm the host of the House of Hidalgo show on YouTube. If you're looking to promote your health with CBD oils, you're looking at a booking. Book greenflowerbotanicals.com for your health needs and use the link provided in the comment section of this video, because doing so will help you cleanse your blood and promote the blood of Jesus to the world. Just join our Healthy for the Blood campaign by ordering through the link below, and a percentage of the sale will benefit my ministry. It's all about the blood.
Sewing Cool Stuff and More of Yankton is your one-stop for general alterations, repairs, and custom sewing and sewing classes. Custom projects from baby blankets and memory quilts to jingle and shawl dance regalia dresses, and everything in between. Sewing Cool Stuff and More.
Hey, over here. Did you know you can support the House of Hidalgo show and your favorite cause at the same time? At the House of Hidalgo store, we promote conversation starters. Our apparel is sure to get them talking. Stop in at teespring.com/stores/House of Hidalgo, or click the link in the description box of this video to gaze upon the creativity. Then just order what you want, when you want it, and have it shipped directly to you. Wow! The House of Hidalgo store is here to serve you. Get conversations started the old-fashioned way. Wear it, don't swear it. And remember, we're all about the blood. Welcome to the House of Hidalgo show. This is Rick Tehijo Binya. I am your host, and today is the 10th show of the 2018 God and Wrestling Connection season, and I am privileged to bring you, well, that's kind of interesting word I use there, privileged to bring you the scoop on Titles of Nobility today. So we're going to talk about Titles of Nobility. We're going to help the audience to understand what a title of nobility is and what it actually looks like in the day that we live in, because it happens every day. And we're going to talk about that. First, I want to get a couple things out of the way. I want to thank my patrons, including my newest one, Trinity Clark. Thank you for your support. And I thank all of you guys for, what you do for this show. I thank you for sharing it and for getting the word out there about the House of Hidalgo show, because We got a lot of big things to expose and to share, and this is just the beginning. But today we're going to talk about a whammy. It's a big one. And by the time we're done with this, I hope that you your mind begins to click, because I'm going to share some really good stuff with you today that's going to probably revolutionize your thinking. And by the end of it, you're going to see the light at the end of the tunnel, because there's a lot of light at the end of the tunnel, and we are approaching some very, very good information. So, I want to remind you guys that I do have an EduBite premiere now that's over on my website, therockofsalem.org/membership/. You go there and you sign up for $5 or more a month, and you get all the content. Okay? The only reason I have categories above $5 is because I want to give people, different ways of giving, because giving is a big part of the kingdom of God. So, just wanted to remind you of that. But anyway, aside from that, I want to get over to the screenshot now so I can share with you all of the good news. We're going to go into Titles of Nobility. That's episode 10 of the House of Hidalgo show, God and Wrestling Connection. I'll see you back in a moment. Okay, we're back and we're looking at the presentation now. Let me just go ahead and get this started. Okay, so we're going to discuss a little bit about titles of nobility. Actually, a lot about titles of nobility. What is a title of nobility? Well, the title of nobility is a clause or a provision in the United States Constitution, Article 1, Section 9, Clause 8, that forbids granting certain privileges, circle that word, of nobility to citizens. The provision also restricts members of the government from receiving gifts from foreign countries without the consent of the Congress. And that's a slick one. We'll talk about that later. The intention behind this clause is to prevent the establishment of a separate class of people in the society, as well as to protect the republican forms of government from being influenced by other governments, as it has been, by the way. That's why they keep saying we're a democracy, because it's been influenced. A similar clause is Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution, which forbids states also from granting titles of nobility. And that's the one we'll really be talking about today, is the states. The Constitution does not expressly prohibit any citizen. Notice the small c on citizen, so it's a inferior citizen. It's not a proper noun. But the Constitution does not expressly prohibit any citizen from accepting a title of nobility from a foreign country. Now, let's very quickly say a couple things just off the start here. First of all, I'm using uslegal.com because this is, if somebody were just to Google the definitions of all the words I'll be bringing up today, these are the definitions they would see. Now, they are very slickly written. I mean, you could tell an attorney has written these in such a way as to deprive one's imagination from truth, okay? Because there's a little bit more to a title of nobility than what they are talking about here. But we're going to use the uslegal.com site for several of these words because I want to show you just what they're doing. They're actually telling us what they're doing. Up here in the second or third sentence, the provision also restricts members of the government from receiving gifts, or fees, and regulatory gifts. Are those the same thing? Anyway, from foreign countries without the consent of the Congress. Well, yeah, when you begin to realize who we are as the people, and that since 1933, since the bankruptcy took place, and the Act in 1934, the Trading with the Enemies Act, that created a provision to where the people became the enemy of the deep state. I'm not going to call it government, of the deep state. That's exactly what we've been. We've been a foreign nation to the people of the deep state. Let's go on. So let's talk about the right to contract, because that's really what the Titles of Nobility definition was alluding to, was that the people have a right to contract indefinitely. So the doctrine, which states that people have the right to, I'll tell you what, let's go back for a second. Right here at the end, where it says, the Constitution does not expressly prohibit any citizen from accepting a title of nobility from a foreign country. It's because there is no, they cannot impair, Congress cannot impair the obligation of a contract. We're talking about a state Congress. They cannot impair the obligation of a contract. So think about that for a minute. What does that mean? That means that we have unlimited contractual ability. So let's go on to that contract definition now. So this doctrine, the right to contract, which states that people have the right to legally bind them, is known as freedom of contract. Notice how it's worded. To legally bind them. Does it not give you visions of being, fettered by chain to a wall? I mean, pretty slick. Freedom of contract is a judicial concept. Here we go again. Judicial, hiding it behind the judicial construct. Freedom of contracts is a judicial concept which holds that contracts are based on mutual agreement and free choice. Could they not have just said that contracts are based on mutual agreement and free choice? Because actually they are. A mutual agreed contract creates the law. That's actually a fact. It's been since the beginning of time that way. Go back to the Garden of Eden and ask yourself the question, what contract was created by what incident? So therefore, contracts are not to be hampered by external control such as governmental interference. See, they aren't supposed to be interfering in contracts. This is the principle which supports that people are able to fashion their relations by private agreements. Hasn't that been the whole talking point since the beginning of the House of Hidalgo show season 2018 God and Wrestling Connection? Have we been not talking about establishing a private agreement in order to fashion our lives? In fact, we have. So let's read that again. This is the principle which supports that people are able to fashion their relations by private agreements when opposed to the assigned roles of the feudal system. So here again, what is this actually saying? It's really slick legalese trying to hide the fact that, guess what? If you don't fashion your life and your relations by private agreement, what happens by default? Yep, by default, you are basically participating in a feudal system. And if you understand what a vessel or a vassal is, those are two very different things, but a vessel is something that is owned, and a vassal is something that's controlled. Think about it. Freedom of contract embraces two closely connected but two different concepts. Firstly, it indicates that contracts were based on a mutual agreement. And secondly, it emphasizes that the creation of a contract was the result of a free choice, unhampered by external control, including the government or the legislature. Did you hear that? Dear Americans, got this from uslegal.com again, by the way, but dear Americans who think that statutory law, is actually law, it's not. I'm going to show you what it is. Okay? But we have free choice, and it's supposed to be unhampered by external control, including government and or the legislature. Okay? Yikes. Conversion. Let's talk about conversion, because this is what's actually going on. There's conversion taking place. Typically, a conversion is the deprivation of another's right of property in use or possession of a chattel or other interference therewith without the owner's consent and without lawful jurisdiction. A conversion occurs when a person without authority or permission intentionally takes the personal property of another or deprives another of possession or personal property. The using of a thing without the license of the owner or a wrongful sale of it is a conversion. An action for conversion may be maintained by persons having the immediate right to possession of the article converted. A conversion may be committed by unreasonably withholding possession from one who has the right to it. Notice this also comes from uslegal.com. So, you see what a conversion is. Conversion is, to state it simply, it's a deprivation of another's right of property, of one to be able to use their property or to possess it, so on and so forth. Well, and then the conversion occurs when a person without authority or without permission or consent takes hold of the property and sells it or benefits from it in some way. Well, I want to remind people of the certificate of live birth that was converted from the application to a trust document to where someone else has control and ability to profit and benefit from it other than you. So there is a conversion aspect to this title of nobility, and let's go on. So having just covered conversion, let's examine closely how a private right guaranteed under the Constitution, and let's look at the Ninth Amendment as an ideology behind those private rights, because of course that's where we reserve, as the people, we reserve those things that aren't covered in the Constitution. So let's examine closely how a private right guaranteed under the Constitution is converted to a privilege. Did you know they could do that? They do it every day. A lot of you are holding evidence of that. A right is a power reserved by the people, see the Constitution, and the associated Bill of Rights. So that's what a right is. Okay? It's a power that's reserved by the people. Now, can a right be something that's not reserved by the people? Well, no, because then you've turned over your rights if you haven't reserved it. What's a privilege? A privilege is a ceremonial, and I put that there for a reason. A privilege is a ceremonial, usually by application, benefit bought or purchased by one who does not have the natural right to freely use or enjoy the benefit. So a privilege is a ceremonial benefit. Well, yeah, it's ceremonial because look at the whole process one has to get to basically accept the privilege. We're going to go into a case in point here in a minute, but there are many privileges that we operate under every day. And they're privileges because they've been converted from rights to privileges through application or through the desire to be governed by something else or someone else instead of a contract, a free private contract. Personal liberty, this is the law of liberty. Personal liberty is the liberty of an individual. And again, here's a tricky word. That's a tricky word because a U.S. individual is not a free man. A U.S. individual is one who owes an allegiance to the United States because he's chosen not to organize himself under a private contract. But personal liberty is the liberty of an individual to behave as one pleases, except for those restraints imposed by laws and codes of conduct. See how they snuck in the word codes? But see, it's not. They're not talking about the codes as in the statutes, because see, they that's just an adjective. Codes of conduct. But one would read that and go, those are statutes. No. They're not talking about statutes. So let's start over. Personal liberty is the liberty of an individual to behave as one pleases, except for those restraints imposed by laws and codes of conduct of the society in which one lives to safeguard the physical, moral, political, and economic welfare of others. What would that be? 10 Commandments? Yeah. Right? Thou shalt not kill. Well, wait a minute. We kill unborn babies. I guess that one doesn't qualify. Thou shalt not murder. Well, wait a minute. There's this evil syndicate out there. It goes by the acronym of the CF that pretty much murders and, anybody who gets in the way and steals everything that they have. So I guess we don't really operate under that anymore, but there is some kind of a moral safeguard in place. I just can't think of what that is right now. I think we get away with all kinds of things if you're privileged. There's that word again. For instance, liberty of an individual, which consists in the power of locomotion. Keep that word in mind. Of changing situation, or removing his person to whatsoever place his own inclination may direct, without imprisonment or restraint, unless by due course of law. And that due course of law is heavily defined in the Republican form of government. We're talking about a grand jury. And then only if the grand jury unanimously decides, that it needs to go on to a jury trial, then and only then are there 12 people selected who are peers of the accused, who are then must unanimously again come up with a decision to hinder the rights of the man or woman who is charged. Privilege. Let's look at this. A particular and peculiar benefit or advantage enjoyed by a person, company, or class beyond the common advantages of other citizens. An exceptional or extraordinary power of exemption. A right, power, franchise, or immunity held by a person or class against or beyond the course of the law. Black's Law Dictionary Online, 2nd edition. A privilege is a power that a state, being the creator, has the power to regulate matters of profit or for hire. It's very important to understand that the state only controls that which it creates. If it creates a concept, it legislates that concept. Okay? But most every concept has a private way to navigate it. And that private way is recognized and should be recognized. And so that's very important to understand. So, a title of nobility can be defined in this way as a title of privilege, which is purchased from an authority and creator for the privilege of gain in a regulated area of life. Let me give you an example. The right of locomotion to transport one's property on the road in the ordinary course of life and business by horse, carriage, or automobile is a well-documented right that many courts have supported since the beginning. You can see the notations I have there. Go look at those. There are literally thousands of them. Courts agree across the board on this. But where the problem comes in, the confusion comes in, is that the state, being the creator of the privilege to drive, has the authority to regulate the roads as far as those engaged in business for gain or for hire. So the concept that one has the right of locomotion to transport one's property on the road in the ordinary course of life and business by whatever means he wants to, okay, that's a right. But where it gets transferred to a privilege, which in essence is a title of nobility, is that he unknowingly, unwittingly consents to the conversion by obtaining a driver's license, even though his intent is never to be a taxi or an omnibus or some form of transportation that is paid or something that is paid for transporting, such as a truck driver. Those things are to be regulated, but to freely use the roads is not a regulated task. It is actually a right. It's a right of locomotion. And it is a well-defined right under the Constitution, as thousands of cases cite. Now we're going to look at a good case. This is the U.S. Supreme Court, Murdoch versus Pennsylvania, and this happened back in 1943. But I want you to see something, and I want you to take note. 1943. What hasn't happened yet to the church in 1943? I'm gonna play the Jeopardy music here. You know, I should play the Jeopardy music and then come back. You know, do 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 do. You know, and then come back, and at the end, I'll be like, okay, can anybody guess? That'd be a cool game to do sometime. But anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and tell you. What hasn't happened to the church in 1943 is it hasn't been incorporated. The 501c3 has not yet been established. There is no commercial church yet. While churches may have been chartered, okay, up to this point, they were not commercialized. They were not for hire. They were not for profit. Now, churches are considered that because they have enveloped themselves in the 501c3, and even though they're considered a non-profit, not-for-profit corporation, they indeed still have taxing regulation because a non-profit corporation is an oxymoron. So I am going to go ahead and I am going to bring up the case on my window here. Here we go. Now, we're going to read this syllabus. It's not very long. I think it's amazing. A municipal ordinance which, as constructed and applied, requires religious colporteurs to pay a license tax as a condition to the pursuit of their activities is invalid under the federal Constitution as a denial of freedom of speech press, and religion. Did you see what just happened there? Okay. They're saying that to require a religious group, okay, because we're talking about the First Amendment here, that's why. Okay, to require a religious group to pay a license or a tax as a condition to their pursuit of an activity. And in this case, it's Jehovah's Witness going door to door and, selling Jehovah's Witness books, Watchtower Society stuff, is invalid under the federal Constitution as a denial of freedom of speech, press, and religion. They're basically saying, they're admitting here, guess what, guys? These guys are free to pursue this because they're protected. 2, the mere fact that the religious literature is sold rather than donated does not transform the activities of the colporteur into a commercial enterprise. You see what they said there? A church is entitled to sell their literature. It's the freedom of press, which is connected to the first statement that was made. They have a freedom of press, and they have a freedom to remunerate themselves of their cost. So it doesn't turn it into a commercial enterprise just because you got something for sale. 3rd, upon the record in these cases, it cannot be said that Jehovah's Witnesses were engaged in a commercial rather than a religious venture. So somebody had charged them with a commercial crime, and this court decided that because this unincorporated entity, the Jehovah's Witness, were exercising their First Amendment protections, that they weren't a commercial outfit, they were a religious outfit. It's a venture of a religious society. Number 4, a state may not impose a charge for the enjoyment of a right granted by the federal Constitution. What? Did you hear that? A state cannot impose a charge for the enjoyment of a right. Wait, but isn't that a license? Isn't a license a charge to enjoy a right? Go back to the driving incident again. If we're free we have freedom of locomotion to go back and forth in the ordinary course of business and life in our automobile, that's a right. So if you're charged for that right, if you have to obtain some kind of a license to enjoy that right, oh boy, a state may not impose that, says the court. Number 5. The flat license tax here involved restrains in advance the constitutional liberties of press and religion and inevitably tends to suppress their exercise. More support that any tax restrains the advance of constitutional liberties. Number 6, the ordinance is non-discriminatory, is that it applies only to peddlers of wares and merchandise. You see what it says there? Did you catch that? Only to profiteers, those who are in it for gain. Okay? So that the ordinance is non-discriminatory in that it applies also to peddlers of wares and merchandise is immaterial. The liberties guaranteed by the First Amendment are in a preferred position. So they're saying there's a preferred position here. Okay? We have guaranteed right, a guaranteed right that Congress can make no law. And because of that, we're free to exercise our liberties as the church and as ministries of the church, integrated auxiliaries of the church. Number 7. Since the privilege in question is guaranteed by the federal Constitution, First Amendment, and exists independently of state authority, because you cannot mix the state and the church, remember, Congress can make no law. The inquiry as to whether the state is given something for which it can ask a return is irrelevant. How can the state ask a return of an organization that's set up separate of the state? Clues? Very important case. Number 8, a community may not suppress or the state tax the dissemination of views because they are unpopular, annoying, or distasteful. Wow! Did you catch that one? The state can't suppress or tax the dissemination of views because they are unpopular, annoying, or distasteful. QAnon? Sovereign citizen stuff? Let's see. I could think of a lot of things that the media or the state considers distasteful that they suppress all the time. Somebody is in trouble. Number 9. The assumption that the ordinance has been construed to apply only to solicitation from house to house cannot sustain it, since it is not narrowly drawn to prevent or control abuses or evil arising from that particular type of activity. So, an ordinance being construed as not narrowly drawn to prevent or control abuses or evil arising from that type of activity basically protects people are protected under the ambiguity of law. If the law is ambiguous, they're protected. That's what this is saying. But a further observance of this statement shows that it's a whole separate matter from the matter of the First Amendment. They were addressing a separate argument. That argument was that there was an ordinance that was construed to apply to a solicitation from house to house. But because that ordinance in this particular case was narrowly drawn, it was ambiguous, they couldn't use it. But even if they had a solicitation ordinance, that solicitation ordinance is not a preferred right. It's not a preferred right. Where up here it talks about preferred rights. So I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I have, because I'm telling you right now, this is wide eye-opening, very important for us to understand that we are accepting titles of nobility. And I'm going to come back on the screen here. We're going to talk about some final points. So I'll be right back.
Biscayne Bay Bridal Boutique of Yankton offers a wide selection of bridal and special occasion gowns, veils, jewelry, and accessories. We have baptism, first communion, and quinceañera attire, as well as men's and boys' suits, plus a complete line of tuxedo rentals.
Welcome back. So let's take a moment to wrap it up, bring it all together. What we learned today is that converting a right to a privilege is really the same thing as implying nobility upon somebody, because it's a privilege that's being applied And that privilege, when issued by a state, is directly counterintuitive to the constitutional provision of Article 1, Section 10, that talks about states not giving titles of nobility. Talks about states not impairing the obligation of contracts. And really, when a state implies that you have a privilege, that you've gained a privilege that has been at the cost of your right, they have damaged an obligation of contract, because the obligation of contract is that men, women, we the people have the freedom of locomotion. The freedom of locomotion is an absolute right. It's an absolute authority. We have no obligation to the state when it comes to the right of locomotion. As long as we don't harm another person, they can't even bring suit. Okay? So there's a real problem here that needs to be fixed. But in order to fix it, in order to address it, there must be those of us in existence who are choosing to organize ourselves in a private manner without the interference of government or deep state or whatever you want to call them. So you and I, people like us, need to establish our private law and ordinances, our private contracts between one another, and operate in that manner. And I'm telling you, there's a lot of work that's gone on to this effect. And if you want to know more, I'm sorry, but I cannot dispense of it here. You're going to have to come to Edubites Premium on my website, therockofsalem.org, /membership. Sign up there. $5 or more a month, you get the exclusive information. But you have all the principles in front of you. You've been given all the tools that you need. You don't really need me to go into it any further. But if you're one who wants to find out more about the opportunities that there are for you, come join me. Otherwise, take this information, utilize it to the best of your knowledge and the best of your ability. God bless all of you. Thank you for watching the House of Hidalgo show. And remember, this show, the House of Hidalgo show, it's all about the blood.
It's what you made me see.